a brief story. Oh, where is it? Here it is. It's especially connected to Erev Shabbos, to women, which bring in the Shabbos. Here's what the Rebbe related. It's actually L'Kutei Sichos Chelik Yud Gimel. The Frierdiker Rebbe related. This is a Fabrenga 1954. Where does it, how did this happen in Frankfurt, Germany? So it's known that in Frankfurt, Germany, there were very pious Jews. Haredi has now assumed this negative connotation, but it's really a very virtuous description of a Jew that is meticulous and observant and Yireh Shamayim. So in Frankfurt, there were an entire community of extremely observant Yidden, famed and renowned in all of Germany for their piety. And the question is that Frankfurt is one of the centers of the Enlightenment, which gave birth to the Reform movement. And the Enlightenment that began with Mendelssohn and others, that essentially sought to reduce Yiddishkeit to culture and philosophy. Jew in the home, Gentile in the street. You know, it's really incumbent upon us to know the history of this. There's a wonderful book that Tzemach Tzedek and the Haskalah movement, and the Frierdiker Rebbe writes extensively about it, the early history. It's quite fascinating. The Maskilim actually the original Maskilim came along with the following message, that the importance of Hebrew grammar and language and scripture. They actually mocked rabbinic Hebrew because it was not grammatically correct, and all kinds of distortions and quotations and so on. It's time to go back to the original, to scripture. They wrote Sfarim on commentary on Chumash, precise diktuk and poetry and language, and it was originally embraced by, and they got the support of the Gedolei HaMisnagdim of the day. I mean, the Gedolim. That's how they got their foothold. But they were opposed from the get-go by, it started with Baal Shem Tov's time a little bit, but later the Maggid and the Alter Rebbe, and Tzemach Tzedek was all-out war. And later all the Rabbeim after him. But at any rate, the history is fascinating, and we can't really appreciate where we are today without knowing history. So the Frierdiker was asking this question that in Frankfurt, one of the great seats of the Reform movement of the Maskilim, and Dafka in Frankfurt, there was this enclave or this community of very frum Yidden. And the answer is, he says, because it was three women in Frankfurt. We're talking now, the late 1800s. In the words here of the Sikha, that in their stubbornness, they remained committed. There was three things. There was no compromise. Sheitel, Taras Mishpacha, and Chinuch, because that's these foundations of Yiddishkeit. And they kind of made this pact despite external pressures, and they were mocked. It's time to, enlightenment. It's time to embrace modernity and be liberated and so on from the shackles of superstitious, medieval, and even earlier form of Judaism. They resisted that, and because of just three women, they affected an entire community. That over time, in Frankfurt, there was a whole community of, and therefore generations of observant Yidden loyal to Torah mitzvahs. They were told that story then because in those years he was talking a lot about Sheitel. It was a big, now not so much, it was a big nisayon for observant Jews, Chassidim even. And the Rebbe told the story in that context. I should tell you on a personal level. And my mother got married. My parents got married. So this is in Australia, I was born in 57, my sister. This is 1954. So the Rebbe sent a letter to my Zayda, my mother's mother. It's just illustrative of where things were in those days. And basically he excuses himself, apologizes for unsolicited, I wouldn't say advice, but directive. He basically says a beautiful letter that urging to make sure my mother puts on a sheitel. And telling him, like the story in Frankfurt, you're the foundation of Yiddishkeit in Melbourne, Australia. And if she does, she would have been maybe the only woman in Melbourne with a sheitel, maybe another or two. The effect will be enormous. And my mother did. I just want to tell you that it was like even from people in those days, from men, friends. Did not wear a head covering in business. A hat was completely unconventional, disrespectful to wear a hat indoors, and a yarmulke. Come home and put on a yarmulke. Tzitzis inside their clothing. This was the norm when I as a kid growing up. Then the whole atmosphere changed. And one of the critical things was the sheitel. So all this points to many things, but it also points to the incredible effect of one person. In my mother's case, and here 3 women in Frankfurt. It affected a whole generation. So there's 2 messages here: the sheitel specifically, and also the influence that one person or a few people can have on an entire community, and again in generations to follow. Hope you enjoyed the story. Have a wonderful.
Good Shabbos, Rabbi. Now, thank you.
By the way, a correction. The story yesterday, the story yesterday with the Sachako, the business, the deal. In the Milvada, it was Benjamin Kletzke, not Yukasum, that Benjamin Kletzke. He was a businessman that dealt with timber. The story was with him. Anyway, so again, tomorrow, friends, in case you didn't hear, we'll put this on the WhatsApp. A Fabrengen in connection with Chav Chesiv and the Nachona for Gimel Tammuz, 4 o'clock in MTC. Chaim, start working early.
And again, I suspect, yes,
Good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
I suspect